2. My dad's side of the family treated me like a nobody because my mom was just his mistress, while my half-brother was treated like the apple of their eyes because he was born from a legitimate marriage and will be the rightful heir of everything he owns. Now they're scrambling because I was the only one my dad left everything to and revealed the shocking reason behind it. His handwriting, scratchy, uneven. I wish I'd done better by you. I was proud of you even when I didn't say it. This world doesn't treat girls like you fairly, but I hope this helps change that. I hope you build something with it, something that's yours. I sat on the floor, numb. I wanted to cry for all the years he didn't show up, for all the times he let others speak for him, for all the birthdays he missed, but also for the small, quiet truth, that somewhere deep down, he had seen me. Maybe not enough, maybe too late, but still, he saw me. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. Apparently, word of the will had leaked, and a few nosy relatives had come forward with claims that I manipulated my father in his final days. Some even suggested I had tricked him into changing his will. I was suddenly a trending topic in some niche online forums. And through it all, Alex was silent, no public statement, no social media outburst, nothing, which only made me more suspicious. Mr. Bernstein called later that afternoon with an update. He told me the board had accepted my place as the majority shareholder but warned that Alex had privately been trying to stir dissent. Apparently, he had tried to convince some old allies that my father had made the change to punish him and that I would sell off everything out of spite. I asked Mr. Bernstein what my options were, and he said I had to lay low and let the noise pass, or take control publicly, firmly, and without hesitation. I knew what I had to do. That week, I scheduled a meeting with the company board, not to ask for permission but to announce that I was stepping into my role. I wasn't going to run day-to-day operations, I had no experience in corporate leadership, but I was going to hire the right people, keep things ethical, and ensure that every shady corner of my father's company was finally brought into the light. I also issued a formal press release, short, calm, direct. I stated that I had received the inheritance legally and without contest from my father's legal team, that I had no intention of selling off the company or the estate, and that I was committed to honoring the legacy of the man who, in the end, had chosen to do the right thing. Then I asked them to add one final line: let the past speak for itself. I'm here to build the future. It was the start of something bigger than me. Update 3. For a few weeks, things were eerily quiet. Too quiet. I had assumed Alex was lying low after his failed attempt to turn the board against me, but I should have known better. Alex didn't know how to lose. He'd always been the golden boy, praised for breathing, rewarded for mediocrity, and protected from every consequence. So it made perfect sense that his silence wasn't surrender, it was preparation. It started when I got a notice in the mail, a legal challenge to the will. I almost laughed when I read the first few lines. He was claiming my father had been mentally incompetent when he rewrote the will, that he had been under emotional duress and coerced by me in his vulnerable state. He went as far as saying, I used manipulative tactics stemming from a strained, resentful relationship. He painted himself as the devoted son, the one who had cared for our father, the one who had managed the estate, the company, the family, while I was nothing but a bitter, estranged daughter looking for a payday. It was ridiculous. But ridiculous things have a way of gaining traction when enough money and bitterness are involved. I immediately called Mr. Bernstein, who told me not to panic. Apparently, Alex had retained a flashy but deeply unserious lawyer who loved tabloid drama. Bernstein assured me that unless they could provide actual proof of manipulation or fraud, the will would stand. Dad's mental competency had been certified not once, but twice before the will was finalized. All the documents were airtight. Still, it made my stomach twist. I hadn't done anything wrong, but Alex had always been the kind of person who could cause a firestorm just by whining loud enough. And this time, he wasn't just whining, he was strategizing. And through it all, I stayed quiet. It wasn't because I didn't want to fight back, it was because Mr. Bernstein told me something I'll never forget. He said, let them shout into the wind. When people are desperate, they make noise. But noise doesn't win court cases. Proof does. And you have it, all of it. So I waited. I focused on stabilizing the company. I hired a respected executive to help manage operations. I started reviewing old records and board meeting transcripts. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I found something that made me freeze. A financial report from 3 years ago, buried under vague summaries and clever accounting, showing that Alex had authorized massive payouts from company funds into personal ventures that went belly up. One of them was a luxury condo development that never got approved. Another was a so-called tech startup that folded within months. But all of them had one thing in common: the money was gone. Unaccounted for. I handed the report to Mr. Bernstein, who reviewed it and nodded slowly. He said, this wasn't just bad business. If it had been hidden from the board, and it had, this could qualify as corporate fraud. Suddenly, the lawsuit made sense. Alex hadn't just wanted revenge or the family legacy, he wanted protection. He knew that the deeper I dug, the closer I'd get to find out how deep his mismanagement ran. Challenging the will wasn't about me, it was about distracting everyone from him. Our father had let it go. But I wouldn't. I had two choices: I could go nuclear and expose him publicly, or I could wait for court and let his lies unravel in front of a judge. I chose the second. The court date was set. I didn't tell anyone what I had found. Nobody knew the full extent of what I planned to reveal. I wanted Alex to feel safe, arrogant, prepared. And he did. He walked into that courtroom with a smirk, surrounded by handlers. He wore a charcoal gray suit and an expression that screamed entitlement. His lawyer opened with a dramatic statement about betrayal and family dishonor. They made me sound like a villain straight out of a soap opera. And then it was our turn. Mr. Bernstein was calm and razor sharp. He laid out the timeline, the mental competency reports, and the clean documentation of every step my father had taken. And then, just before closing, he introduced the financial report. The room got quiet. Alex's lawyer looked confused. Alex started fidgeting in his seat. Bernstein explained the payouts, the cover-ups, the lack of board approval. Then he dropped the final piece, a letter from my father to the board chair, dated 8 months before he died. In the letter, my father acknowledged discovering Alex's actions and expressed regret over ignoring certain warning signs. He wrote that he was preparing to restructure everything because some inheritances are no longer deserved. You could have heard a pin drop. The judge called for a recess. Alex stormed out, ignoring the small forum reporters he had called. Elaine was nowhere to be found. That night, everything flipped. I wasn't the villain. Final update. My dad's side of the family treated me like a nobody because my mom was just his mistress, while my half-brother was treated like the apple of their eyes because he was born from a legitimate marriage and will be the rightful heir of everything he owns. Now they're scrambling because I was the only one my dad left everything to and revealed the shocking reason behind it. The villain anymore? I was the quiet daughter who'd stayed out of the spotlight, only to be handed the burden of cleaning up someone else's mess. But the real shock came the next morning. Mr. Bernstein called me early. He said Alex had withdrawn the lawsuit. Not only that, he had fled the country. No press statement, no apology, just silence. Elaine sold her townhouse 2 days later, and just like that, the people who used to treat me like a footnote were disappearing one by one, scrambling, retreating, trying to pretend they hadn't spent years writing me off. But they had. And soon, they would find out exactly why my father left everything to me and what secret he had kept all these years that finally tipped the scale. Update 4. The dust hadn't even settled after Alex fled the country, but the aftermath kept rippling. Old board members began distancing themselves from him. Former employees came forward quietly, telling me stories about how Alex had bullied his way into control and ignored Dad's actual plans for the future. One of them, a retired executive named Harold, requested a private meeting. What he said that day still gave me chills. He told me there was something I needed to see, something my father had once trusted him to keep under wraps just in case things ever got ugly. At the time, Harold hadn't understood what my dad meant, but after what had happened in court, he finally did. He handed me a USB drive and said it was from my father, a recording. I played it that night, alone in my study. My father's voice came through clear as day, calm and steady. He was sitting in his office, maybe a year before he passed. Judging by his tone, he said he knew that when he died, chaos would likely follow, and he wanted someone, anyone, to understand why he'd made the decisions he did. He said that for years, he'd believed that keeping the peace with his first family was worth sacrificing certain truths. It was easier to play the role of the regretful father who stayed than to admit something no one had ever dared to say out loud. And then he dropped the bombshell. Alex wasn't his biological son. I froze. My father said that during the early years of his marriage to Elaine, there had been issues, distance, suspicion, and then one day, a confrontation after he found some letters tucked away in Elaine's drawer. Love letters. Not from him. She had been having an affair. When she got pregnant, she told him the baby was his, and maybe for a while, he wanted to believe it. But something had always nagged at him, the timeline didn't line up, the dates didn't make sense. And when Alex was born, something in him just shifted. He said he spent years doubting, wondering, until finally, when Alex was a teenager, he secretly got a DNA test. The result confirmed everything. Alex was not his child. I remember staring at the screen, my hands trembling. I had to rewind that part just to hear it again. But he didn't stop there. My father said he made the decision to raise Alex anyway, that he thought maybe he could overcome the betrayal for the sake of a boy who hadn't asked for any of it. But the years that followed made it harder and harder to justify. Alex became entitled, cruel, arrogant, the very worst reflection of everything my father stood against. Meanwhile, he said there was me. He admitted he hadn't been the perfect father, that he let guilt and public opinion steer too much of his life, that he had allowed others, especially Elaine and her circle, to dictate how much I could be included in this world. He thought if he kept me at arm's length, he could avoid making waves, that maybe I'd never notice how deep the rejection really ran. But I did notice. And apparently, he had too. He said he began watching from afar, my work ethic, my independence, the way I didn't rely on his name for anything. I had built something from scratch. I never asked for a dime, even when I was struggling. I never came knocking, even when his other child was out there burning his money and legacy. He said that in his final years, he realized something painful. The only real child he had, the only one who loved him without an agenda, was me. And that's why he left everything to me. He said, and I quote, "Not because I owe her, but because I trust her. Because she is mine in every way that matters." By the time the video ended, I was crying, not from sadness, but from a strange kind of grief mixed with validation. For years, I told myself I didn't care, that I didn't need to be accepted by people who didn't see me. But hearing him finally say it out loud, that he saw me, that he knew what had been done to me, cracked something open inside me I hadn't even realized was still there. I called Mr. Bernstein the next day and told him everything. He sat in stunned silence for a while before saying that while the will was already final and secure, the recording explained a lot. He asked what I wanted to do with it. I had to think about that. Part of me wanted to go public, to rub it in the faces of everyone who had called me names, painted me as the side product of some scandal, while treating Alex like royalty. But another part of me, maybe the wiser part, knew that some truths didn't need to be shouted, they just need to exist. So I released a short public statement through Mr. Bernstein's office. It didn't mention the recording or Alex's paternity. All it said was that my father made thoughtful, conscious decisions in his final months, rooted in truth and legacy, not obligation or guilt. Privately, I sent the recording to Elaine. She tried calling me multiple times after that. I didn't answer. Her last message was long and desperate, filled with self-pity and regret. She said she never meant to hurt anyone, that she did what she thought was necessary to keep the family together, that she loved Alex and feared what would happen if the truth ever came out. She begged me not to release the recording publicly. I saved the message. I may not use it now, but I will. Some truths are powerful enough without an audience, and some truths are earth-shattering when used at the right time. As for Alex, I heard through quiet channels that he was living somewhere in Switzerland, trying to liquidate the rest of his personal assets. Apparently, even the people who once championed him were now pretending they barely knew him. Funny how fast loyalty disappears when the inheritance does too. So I was waiting for him to lose everything. Only then would I tell him the truth. And then I would sue him and his mother. I will not let it go. I want to see them in the state that I was in when I lost my mother. Meanwhile, I stayed focused. I poured everything into building a foundation in my mother's name to support underprivileged youth. The first scholarship we funded went to a young woman who reminded me of myself at 19, quiet, overlooked, but hungry to prove she was more than people expected. And when I attended the first fundraiser gala, someone asked me a question I hadn't prepared for. They said, "How does it feel knowing your father chose you in the end?" I thought about it, about the girl who used to wait by the door for letters that never came, about the whispered insults from people who saw me as illegitimate, about the years I told myself I was fine with being invisible. And then I said simply, it feels like I was never invisible. I just hadn't been seen by the right person yet. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.